This is my house. I pay for everything. You can't contribute anything to the house, so don't ever talk when I am talking.
Don't touch anything in this house without asking me first. He said it just like that, flat, casual, like he was reminding me to close the tap. I had just finished rearranging the living room, moved the sofa slightly, shifted a side table closer to the window. Nothing dramatic, nothing expensive, nothing that required money or permission. Just a woman trying to make her home feel like hers. Eric stood at the door, bag still on his shoulder, eyes scanning the room like an inspector who had found a violation. I paid for everything in here, he said. Every chair, every curtain. You don't earn, you don't contribute, so nothing in this house moves unless I say so. I opened my mouth. Stella? Just my name, like a full stop, like a door slamming shut in my face. I closed my mouth. He dropped his bag, walked to the kitchen, and called out to ask what I had cooked. Same voice, completely unbothered, like he hadn't just told me I had no right to exist freely in my own home. Like the words hadn't landed anywhere. Like I was the wall he'd just spoken at and not a woman standing 3 feet away, swallowing something hot and sharp that had no name yet. But it had a name. I just wasn't ready to say it out loud. This was not the first time. It wasn't even close to the first time. But something about that particular evening, the casualness of it, the way he walked straight to the kitchen afterwards like nothing had happened, sat differently in my chest. It didn't dissolve the way the other moments had. It stayed, hard and solid, like a stone I had accidentally swallowed. I stood in the middle of that rearranged living room for a long time after he disappeared into the kitchen. The sofa was still in its new position. I looked at it. I thought about pushing it back. I thought about the fact that I was actually considering undoing something as small and harmless as moving a sofa because my husband had decided I needed his permission to breathe in my own home. I left the sofa where it was. It was the smallest rebellion I had ever staged, but it was something. My name is Stella Adeyemi. I grew up in Ibadan, in a small face me I face you compound in Agodi, the third of 5 children. My mother sold akara by the roadside every morning before 6 a.m., and my father drove a damful bus that broke down more than it ran. We were not poor in spirit, but we were poor in pocket, and I knew from childhood what it felt like to want things you couldn't have. So when Eric walked into my life at 24, Eric with his steady job at the oil company, Eric with the clean car and the calm voice, and the way he looked at me like I was something rare, I felt like God had finally answered the prayers I said on my knees as a little girl. He was kind, genuinely kind, not the performative kindness of men who want something. He paid my rent when my landlord threatened to throw me out. He took me to the hospital when I had typhoid and sat in that waiting room for 6 hours without complaining. He remembered small things, the way I liked my tea, the fact that I was scared of loud music at night, the exact shade of blue that made my skin glow. When he asked me to marry him, I didn't hesitate. And when he said after our marriage, "Stella, you don't need to work. I have enough for both of us. Stay home and rest," I heard it as love. I heard it as finally. I quit my small administrative job at the logistics company. I told myself it was temporary. I'd rest a little, settle into marriage, and then figure out something to do. But the months passed, and the comfort wrapped itself around me like a warm blanket, and I stopped thinking about what I was going to do. I cooked and cleaned and made his house beautiful. I went to women's meetings at church. I visited family. I rested. And slowly, without ever deciding to, I disappeared. Not physically. I was there every day, in that house, in that kitchen, in that bed. But the Stella who once worked 2 jobs to support her siblings, the Stella who once saved 3 months' salary to buy her mother a new stove, that Stella faded. I didn't notice because Eric was still kind. For the first 3 years, he was still kind. But kindness, I would learn, can become a leash. The changes came slowly, so slowly I almost missed them. The first time he told me my opinion didn't matter, I thought he was just tired. We were arguing about where to spend Christmas, my family or his, and he cut me off mid-sentence and said, "Stella, I'm the one paying for the ticket. We go where I say." I laughed it off. I told myself he was stressed from work. The second time, we were at his colleague's dinner party, and I made a comment on politics. A simple, harmless comment. And Eric looked at me across the table and said, loud enough for the people beside us, "Sweetheart, stick to things you understand." The table went quiet for exactly 2 seconds. I smiled. I picked up my glass of juice. I said nothing. But inside, something shifted. The third time, the fourth time, the fifth. Each one small enough to dismiss, but they were building, like bricks, like a wall going up around me, one small stone at a time, until one morning I woke up and realized I had to ask my husband's permission before I could visit my own mother. Not because he had ever forbidden me to go, but because I had no money for transport. That is what dependence does to you. It doesn't lock the door. It just makes sure you have no key of your own. By year 6 of our marriage, I had become a different woman. I second-guessed everything I said before I said it. I dressed in ways I thought he would not annoy me. I cooked what he wanted, even when I was craving something else entirely. I stopped inviting my friends to the house because he had made comments, small, cutting comments about them being market women and gossips. My world had shrunk to the size of our apartment and whatever mood Eric was in that day. And the worst part? I had convinced myself it was normal. I had convinced myself this was what marriage looked like. African women around me were enduring far worse. At least he didn't beat me. At least he provided. At least. I was measuring my life in at least. Then came the morning my sister called crying. Her school fees, 20,000 naira. Her name had been struck from the register. I walked into our bedroom where Eric was knotting his tie in the mirror, and I asked him quietly. He didn't turn around. "You want to help your sister? Get a job, earn your own money, then throw it anywhere you want." I stood there frozen. This was the man who had once driven 2 hours in the rain just to bring me paracetamol when I had a headache. This was the same man who used to call me his peace, his home, his reason. What happened to that man? I didn't have an answer yet, but I felt the shape of something breaking inside me. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet, terrible crack, the way old ceramic splits right down the middle before it finally falls apart. I stood in the middle of that rearranged living room for a long time after he disappeared into the kitchen. The sofa was still in its new position. I looked at it. I thought about pushing it back. I thought about the fact that I was actually considering undoing something as small and harmless as moving a sofa because my husband had decided I needed his permission to breed in my own home. I left the sofa where it was. It was the smallest rebellion I had ever staged, but it was something. After that morning, I started paying attention in a way I hadn't in years. Not to Eric. I had been paying too much attention to Eric for too long. I started paying attention to myself, to what I had become, to how far I had drifted from the woman I used to be. I remember sitting on the balcony one evening, watching the streets below. A young woman was walking fast, a laptop bag on her shoulder, earphones in her ears, buying suya from the roadside vendor with money she pulled from her own wallet. She was laughing at something, head thrown back, completely unbothered. I watched her until she disappeared around the corner, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Envy. Not the bitter kind, the honest kind. The kind that tells you the truth about what you want. I wanted to be her. Not her specifically, I didn't know her life, but I wanted that feeling, that unbothered, that walking through the world knowing that the money in your hand is yours, that nobody can take your freedom because your freedom is not tied to anyone else's salary. I had given that away, willingly, gratefully, and I hadn't even noticed until it was gone.
I began having quiet conversations with myself in those weeks. Long, honest conversations, the kind you have when you finally stop lying to yourself. I asked myself, if Eric left tomorrow, what would I do? The answer came quickly, and it terrified me. Nothing. I would do nothing because I had nothing. No savings, no account with meaningful money in it, no skills I had recently used, no network of professional contacts, no recent work history. I had a degree, a good one, that had been sitting untouched in a drawer for 6 years. I was 32 years old and I was starting from zero. But what frightened me more than the zero was the question underneath it. How did I let this happen? Because nobody forced me. Eric never sat me down and said, Stella, I want you to become completely helpless. He just made it easy to stop trying. He just made it comfortable to depend. And I, exhausted from years of struggling before him, had run into that comfort with my eyes wide open and my guard completely down. I had confused being taken care of with being safe. They are not the same thing. Being taken care of can end the moment the person taking care of you decides to stop. Being safe means you can take care of yourself. It was around this time that I noticed the phone calls. Eric had always been protective of his phone. He held it face down on the table, took calls in the bathroom, kept the screen brightness low. I had noticed these things before and pushed them aside, told myself I was being paranoid, a suspicious African wife looking for trouble. But now I was paying attention, really paying attention. The calls that came late, the text he stepped outside to answer, the faint smell of a perfume that wasn't mine on the collar of his work shirt one Thursday evening. I didn't confront him immediately. I wasn't ready for that conversation. I didn't yet have solid ground to stand on. But I filed it away and I kept watching. I also started doing something else in those quiet weeks, something small and practical and necessary. I started learning. My cousin Ngozi had been running a small catering business for 3 years. I had always admired her from a distance, her hustle, her energy, her constant movement. I called her one afternoon while Eric was at work and told her I wanted to learn, not as a customer, as someone who wanted to understand how she did it. She was quiet for a moment. Stella, are you okay? I said, I will be, but I need to start learning something. She didn't ask more questions. That is the thing about women who have built themselves. They recognize the hunger in another woman's voice. They know the sound of someone waking up. She said, come on Saturday, I have an event. You can observe and help. I won't pay you because I'm your cousin and you are learning, but you will leave knowing more than you came with. I was there by 7 a.m. Those Saturdays with Ngozi changed something in me. Not because catering was my passion, I wasn't even sure yet what my passion was, but because for the first time in years, I was doing something for myself, something that had nothing to do with Eric's schedule, Eric's mood, or Eric's approval. I was moving. And movement, I discovered, is medicine. I started small. I watched how Ngozi priced her menus. I watched how she negotiated with clients, how she handled difficult people, how she managed money coming in and going out. I started reading articles, videos, a free online course about small business basics. I borrowed one of Ngozi's old notebooks and wrote things down. Eric didn't notice any of this. He was increasingly absent, physically present in the apartment, but emotionally miles away, always on his phone, always leaving early, always returning with that distant look of a man who has stopped investing in his home. Our conversations had become transactional. Stella, where are my blue socks? Stella, what did you cook? Stella, I won't be home for dinner. That was our marriage in those months. 4-word sentences and empty silences. I should have been devastated. Instead, I was busy. Then came the night everything cracked open. I had gone to bed early, but something woke me just after midnight. Eric's phone was on the bedside table. He had left it there when he went to use the bathroom, and the screen lit up with a message. I didn't mean to read it. My eyes just landed there. Baby, when are you telling her? I'm tired of hiding. I stared at that screen for a long time. Then I put the phone face down, lay back on my pillow, and stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly in the dark. I didn't cry that night. I just thought, so, this is where we are. I thought about the girl on the street with her laptop bag. I thought about Ngozi and her notebook of numbers. I thought about the drawer where my degree was collecting dust. And I made a decision, quietly in the dark, with the ceiling fan spinning above me. I was going to leave. Not yet, not with nothing, but I was going to leave. If this story is already hitting close to home, subscribe right now and turn on notifications, because what happens next is going to change the way you think about love, money, and your own life.
I waited 3 more weeks before I confronted him. 3 weeks of watching, preparing, and quietly shifting things in my favor. I had spoken to Ngozi about staying with her if I needed to. I had started a small savings, nothing dramatic, just the small amounts I could gather from the grocery money, the change I kept instead of reporting. It felt dishonest, and it felt necessary at the same time. I also had a conversation with my old university friend, Amaka, who was now a lawyer. Not a formal consultation, just a phone call over rice and beans, where I described my situation in general terms, and she listened carefully and then said, very gently, "Stella, know your rights before you move." I wrote down everything she told me. When I finally brought it up, it was a Saturday afternoon. Eric was home for once, sitting in the living room with the television on, pretending to watch football, but actually on his phone. I came in from the kitchen, sat across from him, and said his name clearly. He looked up. "We need to talk," I said. Something shifted in his face. Not guilt exactly, more like calculation. Like he was already deciding how much to admit and how much to deny. "Talk about what?" he said. "About the woman who is tired of hiding." The room went silent except for the television commentator celebrating a goal somewhere in Spain. Eric set his phone face down on the cushion beside him. He leaned back, and then he did something I did not expect. He didn't deny it. He didn't even look ashamed. He looked at me with a kind of tired impatience, like a man confronting a problem he had been meaning to deal with for a while. "Stella," he said, "let's not do this." "We are already doing it," I said. "Tell me the truth." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Her name is Priscilla. She works in my company. It's been going on for 8 months. 8 months. The number landed in my chest like a stone into still water. 8 months of Priscilla while I was in this apartment, cooking, cleaning, shrinking, depending, waiting. I felt my throat tighten. I felt the back of my eyes sting. But I had rehearsed this moment in my head so many times that my body held itself together by sheer force of will. "I want a separation," I said. He tilted his head. And then, and this is the part I will never forget for the rest of my life, he smiled. Not a kind smile, not an apologetic smile, a smile of pure, uncomplicated confidence. "Stella," he said, "where will you go?" I looked at him. "You don't have a job," he continued, his voice dropping into that low, setting tone I had come to recognize as the sound of him reminding me who held the power. "You don't have savings. You haven't worked in 6 years. Your family can't carry you. What exactly is your plan?" "That's not your concern," I said. He laughed, softly, dismissively. "You'll be back in 2 weeks," he said. "I know you, Stella. You're not built for struggle. You had enough of that growing up. You came to me because I gave you comfort. Without me, you have nothing." The word nothing. He said it so easily, so completely, like it was simply a fact, like the sky being blue or water being wet. You have nothing. I sat with that word for a moment. I let myself feel it, the burn of it, the deliberate cruelty wrapped in calm. And then I stood up. "I'll be gone by Monday," I said. He didn't move. He picked up his phone. He unmuted the football match. He genuinely believed I would not go. I left on Sunday, not Monday.
I packed what was mine, my clothes, my documents, my degree from that drawer, my mother's photograph, a small jewelry box, and I put them all in 2 bags. Ngozi came with her car, and we loaded everything in the time it took Eric to finish his shower. When he came out in his towel and saw the bags by the door, and then Ngozi standing in his living room with her arms crossed, his expression changed for the first time. "Stella, lock up after yourself," I said, and I walked out of that apartment without looking back. My hands were shaking the entire drive to Ngozi's house, not from fear, from the overwhelming, terrifying, electric feeling of someone who has just jumped from a great height and now is discovering with shocked joy that they can fly. The first month was the hardest thing I have ever done in my adult life. Ngosi's spare room was small and smelled faintly of stockfish and cardboard from the boxes she kept stacked in the corner. The mattress dipped in the middle. The ceiling had a water stain shaped like a map of somewhere. I lay there many nights, staring at that stain, having full conversations with my fear. My fear said, "Go back. He was right. You can't do this." I said, "Watch me." The practical problems were immediate and relentless. I had no income. The small money I had saved from the grocery change ran out in 3 weeks. My family was supportive in spirit but stretched thin in resources. My mother offered to send what she could from the Akara store money, and that offer nearly broke me in two because I knew what that money cost her. I didn't take it. Instead, I threw myself into learning and doing with the kind of focused desperation that only comes from having no other option. Ngozi gave me real work in her catering business, not just observing, but genuinely working, and now she paid me, small but real. I washed, chopped, served, coordinated, carried heavy pots, and smiled at clients I had never met, and thanked them for business that wasn't even mine yet. I was 32 years old, carrying rice cookers at other people's parties. I did not allow myself to feel ashamed of this. On the days when the shame crept in, and it did, because I am human and we are in Nigeria and people talk, I remembered that ceiling fan spinning above me in the dark. I remembered 8 months and the name Priscilla. I remembered the smile on Eric's face when he said, "You have nothing." That smile was fuel. Within 3 months, something began to shift. My hands had memory now. I was faster, more confident. I started handling client consultations for Ngozi because my communication was strong and clients responded well to me. I negotiated a percentage arrangement with Ngozi. For every new client I brought in, I earned a cut. I brought in 4 new clients in my first month under this arrangement. Corporate events, office parties, a naming ceremony for a government official's grandchild. The money was not life-changing, but it was mine. Mine. That word sat differently now, completely differently. When I held my first envelope of money that I had fully earned, I sat alone in Ngosi's spare room and I just held it. I didn't count it immediately. I just sat with the weight of it in my hands, feeling something I hadn't felt in 8 years. Dignity. I also started the online business I had been quietly researching during those weeks at home. I had noticed that there was a gap in the market for custom event decor in our area. Centerpieces, balloon arrangements, personalized items for parties and corporate functions. The investment to start was low. The demand was real. I started Instagram and WhatsApp pages. I studied competitors obsessively. I stayed up past midnight watching tutorial videos and practicing on small sample decorations that I arranged and rearranged on Ngosi's kitchen table while she slept. My first order came from a woman who had seen my Instagram page and wanted something simple for her daughter's birthday. It was a small order. I spent more on it in time and effort than I made in profit, but I photographed it, posted it, and within a week had 3 more inquiries. Small, consistent, mine. By the 6th month, I had moved out of Ngosi's spare room. I rented a small, self-contained apartment, a room, a kitchenette, a bathroom with a window that let in good morning light. I bought a second-hand plastic table and 2 chairs. I hung my mother's photograph on the wall. I stood in the middle of that small, clean, entirely ordinary room, and I felt like I was standing in a palace. Because every single thing in that room, every bolt of nail holding those chairs together, every square meter of that modest rent was paid for by my own hands. Nobody could take it from me. Nobody could remind me whose name was on the bill. By the end of the first year, the decor business had grown beyond what I had imagined. I had a small team, 2 young girls I trained, both of whom brought the same hungry energy I started with. I had reliable monthly income. I had savings, real savings, in an account with my name alone. And then I bought the car. A used Honda, modest, functional, exactly what I needed. Nothing extravagant, but when I drove it off the lot 3 minutes later, I pulled over on the side of the road because I was crying too hard to see clearly. Happy crying, healing crying, the kind of crying that has been waiting inside you for years. People started noticing. Not just anyone. Mutual friends, people from church, people who had known Eric and I as a couple and had quietly assumed I would crawl back. They began to look at me differently. There was surprise in some faces, respect in others. And then, inevitably, news found its way back. I don't know exactly when Eric heard that I was not struggling. I don't know who told him that Stella Adeyemi, his Stella, the one with nothing, had a running business, her own apartment, her own car. But I know the moment he heard it changed something for him, because that is when the calls started.
The first call came on a Thursday evening. I was driving home from a client meeting, the windows down, my favorite radio station playing something warm and familiar. When his name appeared on my phone screen, I stared at it for a full 3 seconds. Then I answered. Stella. His voice was different, smaller somehow. The certainty was gone from it, the way air goes out of a tire. Not dramatic, just quietly, steadily deflated. How are you? I'm well, I said. What do you need? A pause. Can we talk properly, not over the phone? I thought about this for a moment. A year ago, that request would have sent my heart racing, with hope, with fear, with the desperate wanting of a woman who had nothing else to hold on to. Now it just sat there, flat and clear, like a question with an obvious answer. About what? I asked. About us, he said. I made mistakes, Stella. Real mistakes. I want to talk about them. I told him I would think about it. I didn't call back that week. He called again the following Tuesday, and the Tuesday after that. On the 4th call, he said the word that I had waited my entire marriage to hear from him. I'm sorry. Not a performance, not a negotiation. It was the voice of a man who had sat alone in his consequences long enough to actually mean it. I listened. He told me that Priscilla had ended things 3 months ago, that it had not been the grand love story he had perhaps imagined it was, that it had fizzled in the way that things built on deception always fizzle, hollow at the center. He told me he had come home to an apartment that felt like a statement of his choices, every quiet room an accusation. He told me he had missed me, not the Stella who cooked his food and deferred to his opinions, but me, the woman underneath all that, the one he had driven 2 hours in the rain for. He said he wanted to start over, properly. He asked if he could see me. We met at a small restaurant, neutral ground, my suggestion. I drove there in my Honda and arrived 3 minutes before he did, which felt important somehow, arriving on my own terms. He looked tired, older, not broken, but bent, the way a person looks when life has handed them a quiet reckoning and they have had to sit with it without anyone to help them dismiss it. He had brought flowers, red ones. He held them slightly awkwardly like a man who was not sure of his welcome. We sat across from each other and he talked. I listened. He was honest in a way I hadn't seen from him in years. Honest about the control, about the contempt that had crept into him slowly as his own pressures mounted, and I was the easiest person to diminish because I was the one who couldn't leave. "I knew," he said quietly. "I knew what I was doing when I said those things to you, and I'm ashamed of it." I looked at him across the table. I looked at this man who once drove in the rain for me, who once been kind, who then slowly, deliberately used my dependence as a weapon, who looked me in the eye and told me I had nothing. I thought about the water stain on Ngozi's spare room ceiling, the first envelope of money in my hands, the day I sat on the side of the road crying into my steering wheel because I had bought my own car. I thought about the woman I had become, not in spite of what he had done to me, but through it, forged in that fire. And I knew, clearly, calmly, without drama, what my answer was. "Eric," I said, "I believe you are sorry. I genuinely believe that." He leaned forward slightly. "But sorry doesn't change what I've built. It doesn't change who I am now. And who I am now doesn't fit back into what we were." He was quiet. "I'm not saying this in anger," I told him, and I meant it. There was no rage in me, no satisfaction at his discomfort, no desire to punish, no performance of strength, just the clean, settled feeling of a woman who has found solid ground and has no intention of leaving it. I spent years making myself smaller so I could fit inside your comfort. I lost myself so completely that I almost couldn't find my way back. I did find my way back, and I'm not going to risk losing myself again. The flowers sat between us on the table, beautiful and unnecessary. What we had, I said carefully, what it turned into, that can't be undone with flowers and sorry. And what I have now, this life, this person I've become, it wasn't built for you to return to. It was built for me. He didn't argue. He didn't bargain. There was a look on his face that was difficult to name. Grief, perhaps, or the particular sadness of understanding something too late. "Is there no way?" he asked quietly. "There isn't," I said, gently, firmly, completely. I picked up my bag. I left the flowers on the table. I walked out of that restaurant into the warm evening air, and the feeling that moved through me was not triumph. Triumph is too small a word, and it implies the wrong thing. What I felt was wholeness, the feeling of all the broken pieces of myself having been gathered up one by one over these long months and fitted back together into something stronger than the original. I drove home with the windows down and the radio on. My apartment was waiting. My business was growing. My name was on every bill, every contract, every account. I made myself a cup of tea, sat by my kitchen window, and watched the evening settle over the city. I was not someone's wife right now. I was not someone's dependent. I was not the woman standing in the living room swallowing something hot and sharp while a man told her she had no right to move furniture in her own home. I was Stella Adeyemi, and I had everything I needed. The moment you stop being financially dependent on someone else is the moment no one can hold your life over your head. Start small. Start now. Start scared if you have to, but start. And if this story found you at the right time, share it with a woman who needs to hear it.